And this here is an important part of deconstruction, taking off of the language that the cult has given you to use for your experience and understanding what are the normal everyday words for that and language to describe that experience, because that's the only way you get a broad group of people to understand what you went through. I'm Daniella, scholar of cults, extreme groups, and extremely bad leadership, and I wrote a book about growing up in the Children of God cult and going into the cult of the U.S. Army. This book is half about a cult, it is half about the Army, and I use no acronyms, and there's no glossary. There is some insider language, but it's either defined in context or you can tell what it is from the context. And that was the thing I did very much on purpose, because I've read Jenna Miscavige's book. I've read so many cult books and so many military books, and there is so much internal language that you cannot expect a reader who has not been in that group to get it all and hold it all in your head for the purpose of understanding the story. Or as I used to say, it takes 6 months to onboard into either the Children of God or the U.S. Army. I can't give you all of that in 150 pages each. This is one of the things that really messes people up with deconstructing language, right? Language is a super powerful tool of cults because language is something we're very willing to change about ourselves. It's very easy to adopt a new turn, a phrase, a new way of saying stuff, etc. It's also the last thing that we keep from the cult, as Amanda Montell says in Cultish. Even after you've grown your hair back out, moved back home, or deleted your app, like the language still stays. And I see this really hardcore with veterans, and then there'll be these like movements to help veterans. Like, oh my God, I rolled my eyes so hard when Google partnered with whatever veteran group to make a search bar where you type in your MOS and it tells you what that job is in the civilian world. And by the way, what is MOS? I don't even know what it stands for, actually, but it is what your job is in the Army. And it's that kind of thing, right? And I used to work really hard with soldiers, like translating their resumes. And people would be like, but man, there's no equivalent for what I did in the civilian world. And I'd be like, one, I challenge you to try harder. Two, if there's truly no equivalent, then it doesn't need to be on your resume because it doesn't make a difference to your job ability. If there is, you got to find a way to tell it, and you got to find a way to tell it in civilianese. You cannot expect the outside world to learn your cult language. And then there's one more thing that becomes really difficult, is that when you start taking off the cult language, no, it wasn't missionary work, it was child trafficking. No, I wasn't performing, I was being exploited. No, it wasn't the group or the family, it was a cult. When you start using the actual words for it, no, it wasn't the Troubled Teen Institute, it was a religious prison camp for children and teenagers. All of a sudden, mom and dad don't want you at Thanksgiving anymore, right? All of a sudden, your siblings that haven't deconstructed, you're too intense for them. All of a sudden, all of the people that are still using the language of the cult, no judgment, they're trying to keep their peace, they haven't gotten to the deconstruction point yet. Everyone's journey takes their own time, but we are talking about you right now. And when you start taking off the cult language and putting on the real, everyday, what everyone uses language for it, you're going to blow up your life a little bit. And it's going to be harder amongst fellow survivors. And that is just part of deconstruction. This is why there's some thought that people who leave the cult and are cut off completely, live in a different place and don't have that much contact for at least a decade, sometimes do better in their like both deconstruction and fitting into the real world, because you're forced immersion, right? You're forced to learn the language of all the normal people and not use the cult language for things. Anyway, language, it's a good thing to think about. I just finished, the language chapter was 2 chapters ago now. I just finished the exploitation of labor chapter, and I'm moving on to exit costs. It's just very exciting. Stay tuned. tuned for Culting Up America. I'm Daniella, scholar of cults, extreme groups, and extremely bad leadership. And I think I already said this, but if you would like a copy of my book, Uncultured, you can get a signed copy here. Came back because I realized I wrote a whole bunch of stuff about unlearning cult language, so why would I not read it to you? This is a subset of the chapter Jargon Jungle, Distinguishable Vernacular in Cults. And it's called Undoctrinating the Cult Language. And undoctrinating is a term I credit to White Woman Whisperer. Go check her out. We have a podcast together too called Hey White Women, where we are deconstructing white supremacy like the cult that it is. Okay, undoctrinating the cult language. Former members of cults often talk about how hard it is to break free from this mental conditioning, especially when language plays such a big role in the control. Amanda Montell tells us that it's often one of the last things for people to deconstruct after their cult experience. Cultish language works so efficiently and invisibly to mold our worldview in the shape of the gurus that once it's embedded, it sticks. After you grow out your hair, move back home, delete the app, whatever it is, the special vocabulary is still there. For example, ex-Scientologists describe having to relearn to think for themselves after years of using terms like suppressive persons and clear, which in the group are packaged with specific meanings that reinforce the cult's beliefs. Loaded language. The language is so ingrained that it can take years for people to untangle their own thoughts from the cult's ideology. It's like their entire vocabulary was a trap, and stepping out of that world means building a new way to speak and think about life. Dr. Lalich says that former members commonly discover that they continue to use group jargon without being aware of it. She also says that sometimes when former members unexpectedly encounter words or phrases from the cult's special language, they may disassociate or experience a variety of feelings, confusion, anxiety, terror, guilt, shame, or rage. This is especially true if you grew up in an abuse situation with the cult language. The long-term effects of this linguistic control don't just mess with your mind, they can seriously impact your relationships. Former cult members talk about how difficult it is to communicate with people outside the group once they leave. That's by design. Friends and family might not understand the loaded language they've been using for years, and members themselves might struggle to express their own ideas clearly without falling back on the cult's terminology. It's like having to unlearn an entire language while learning to be a person again. And that process can be emotionally and mentally challenging, exhausting. When you're deconstructing a coercive system, one of the most important steps is to stop using the words they've drilled into you and learn the correct language for what actually happened. Why? Because the words they give you are loaded. They're designed to keep you thinking the way they want, locked into their worldview. Those words often sanitize or distort reality, making it harder for you to see things clearly. It's like being handed a set of glasses that only shows you what they want you to see. So when you're trying to break free, you have to take those glasses off and start seeing things as they really are. Finding the right word gives you the power to rewrite your story. Once you stop using their language, you start seeing the situation more clearly. For example, calling the children of God's flirty fishing what it was, systematic sexual exploitation and prostitution, takes the spin out of the cult's messaging. When you label things correctly, it's easier to process what really happened and reclaim your own perspective. That shift in language is a key step to rebuilding your sense of self, allowing you to think critically, feel more empowered, and ultimately make sense of your experience on your own terms.